Alright people, this is what's gonna happen. I'm gonna do a stick up, and I need all of you to get on the floor. I need you to give me your bracelet, I need you to give me your purse, and I need you to give me your wallet. Oh, and you, I need that plastic gun. Why? Because I'm using nunchucks to rob a store. I need better props. Back off. I sense a great sadness in your heart, robber man. Pas-de-deux. I don't want any of that. Just go lay down with the rest of them. Give me your money, too. You clearly don't know who you're messing with. It's not worth this. I said pas-de-deux. It's a good thing you left. I didn't want to have to use my nunchucks either. Princess Tutu is a fairy tale anime partially inspired by The Ugly Duckling and Swan Lake. Now, I usually don't go out of my way to watch any sort of fairy tale because it's just not for me, but Princess Tutu I actually felt really interested in because there was like multiple layers to the story. It's very complex for what it is, plus it actually gets pretty dark. It's not what you would expect of your ordinary fairy tale anime, and it's also a beautiful blend of, it's got its drama, it's got some suspense, also a little bit of romance going on here, and of course comedy as well. And it's just this enjoyable experience that I never expected to have when watching any sort of fairy tale. The story of Princess Tutu is set within a fantasy world where things don't work how you would expect them to, because here we have a novel called The Prince and the Raven, where the Prince and the Raven managed to escape the novel out into their version of the real world, and in order for the prince to seal away the evil powers of the Raven, he took a sword, and of course he just jammed it through his own heart and shattered all of his emotions, and the emotions went elsewhere within the kingdom, leaving him in just an empty shell and not making that much of a mess as we would expect when somebody does that with a sword. So definitely do not try this at home, kids. But our protagonist of the show is a female duck named Duck. She's a duck, and she is deeply in love with the prince. Now, it's lucky for her, however, because she loves the prince so much that she is able to transform into a human girl. Like in certain occasions, if she touches water, she's going to transform into a girl, which is kind of strange for a duck. Is it just me, or does Duck sound like someone ripped straight out of the pages of Ranma 1/2? Of course, there's also another transformation, as she has this jewel that she can use to transform into Princess Tutu, the heroine of the story, who is also in the real world as well. So it's Princess Tutu's job to go around the kingdom and round up all of the missing parts from the prince's heart so that she can restore it to him and he can have all of his emotions back. But it's not as easy as it sounds, because each of these heart shards are embedded within a person around, and she has to find them and convince them to give up the piece of the heart shard. And there's also people working alongside with the prince who don't have his best interest in mind. They want him to basically stay someone who has no emotions, that way they can control him. Everything that I've explained so far is simply the introduction to the story. There's so much more here because this is a very complicated story, and honestly it's easily one of the most dynamic stories that I've seen in a long time, because in the beginning of the anime we have Princess Tutu and she's trying to save the heart shards of the prince in order to restore his feelings back. So first of all, we see that we know she can't ever confess her love for him because she would turn into a speck of light and die. That is basically explained to us in the beginning of the series, so we know that already it's going to be this unrequited love of the princess here, or at least of Duck anyways. And then we also see that there's this conspiracy going on where everybody closest to the prince is trying to work against him and keep him without having his emotions. And on top of that, as Tutu goes around and captures these emotions and giving them back to the prince, his personality is changing every time he gets a new heart shard back. And it's actually interesting to think about this because it makes you think about how somebody would act if they only had certain emotions, and that's basically what happens with the prince here. Like, say for example, if he has the emotion of fear, but he doesn't have other emotions that enable him to rationalize everything, it will change his personality. And he is a character that his development I felt is a bit sporadic because it's mostly revolving around the heart shards, but it's actually the other characters that I felt developed beautifully. So as the prince is getting back his individual emotions, there are times when he does go a little bit crazy here, mostly because he only has these few set of emotions and he doesn't have the other emotions to help balance himself out. And also on top of that, I forgot to mention earlier that when he took the sword and like rammed it through his heart, he lost his memory as well. So when he feels fear for the first time, it's like he really is feeling fear for the first time, and he just doesn't know how to respond to that. So when I talk about character development, I'm not really talking about the prince here, because I think everybody knows that the prince is going to develop because the story is about him getting his emotions and his memory back. So of course there's going to be development there, but I want to talk about the developments of the other characters. But this is going to make it a little bit tricky because I don't want to spoil you to the experience, and if I did tell you about some of the developments, then it would basically kind of spoil the experience. So all that I'm going to say, because I'm going to keep this very vague here, I'm not going to give you any names, but the characters, pretty much all of the characters in Princess Tutu except for a duck herself, I didn't like him, even the prince, because he was this very bland and dry character with no personality because he didn't have any feelings, and then everybody else in the story I just didn't care for. But as the story continues, we learn more about these characters because the characters learn more about their relation to the story, and not the story of Princess Tutu, but the story of the prince and the crow, which is the book within Princess Tutu. And later on in the story, this is actually where it gets pretty complicated, because it turns out that there's like multiple layers to the story, and it's like I said earlier, with the prince and the crow escaped from the book into the real world, so we start to learn of a particular connection between the world and the book, and the characters have to uncover what this connection is and try and create an ending for the story, because as we know in the beginning, Drosselmeyer, the author of the book, died before it ever finished. So we already know how the heart shards affect the prince, where his memory left him, his feelings left him, and whenever a feeling comes back for the very first time, it's like he's never felt the emotion before, so it can drive him a little bit crazy. But whenever all of these emotions got expelled from his body and embedded into the people around him in the kingdom, whenever Tutu goes out to see them, it's kind of like they were normally emotionally balanced people, but they got this extra emotion, and it kind of set them off the deep end and made them a little bit crazy as well. So Tutu's got to basically go in there and get inside of their head by asking them questions about how they feel, like, you think this is going to make you happy, you need to do this and whatnot. And it's really interesting to see her do that, because it's just not what we expected here. And you know, I'm actually very happy because of that, because I'd rather see a dance and somebody ask questions, you know, these introspective questions to the person, than a musical any day. So just give me the ballerina dance, and please don't give me any musicals, which I'm happy that they didn't. So the story of Princess Tutu is one that I actually enjoyed more the longer that I watched it. It's kind of like this big snowball that's building up, because in the beginning I wasn't really feeling it. I felt like it was very repetitive, because Princess Tutu would go from person to person every episode for the most part, and get back one of these heart shards, and there just wasn't enough substance for me in the beginning of the story to really just sink my teeth into it. But that doesn't last for very long, maybe 6 or 8 episodes, and I feel like if you're somebody who dropped the show because of that, I would recommend trying to get back into it and seeing what else happens, because there's a lot that happens here. So after we get past that initial part, we see that the characters are learning and the personalities are changing in accordance to the things that happen within the story. And then there's this final part, which I won't give you any specific details because I don't want to spoil you, but this is where we learn about the relation of the characters to the story itself. And I'm not talking about the story of Princess Tutu, but the story of the prince and the crow, because there's actually the show becomes self-aware to a point where it knows that certain characters come from a book. So not only is Princess Tutu a great fairy tale, especially for those of you who are older, but it also has a good mystery to it and would warrant a few other rewatches so that you could understand things from the beginning of the series that are explained in the end. I'm just going to say that it was a good ending, it was a complete ending, and there's no like second half of the story that's in a manga somewhere. This is a complete story. The only issue that I have with the ending is that this is one where it tells you the story of the different characters at the end, which I actually like that, especially for stories that you really care about the characters. But this one, there's one character at the end of the story where they kind of briefly brushed over this person's story quickly at the last thing. There's like this one last sentence of the anime, and I felt like, is that really all you're going to say about that? And I checked and see if there was another episode after it, but aside from that, it was a It was a good ending. I'm just going to say that. The ending is a complete story. So moving on to the presentation, Princess Tutu aged beautifully, so much so than many other anime within its decade. I thought this would have came out in the early 2010s, but in fact it came out in the early 2000s, back when they were switching over to using computers to color the cells, back with the digital revolution of anime. And a lot of anime back then actually looked pretty bad, which is why I feel like people say that they don't like old anime, and when they say old anime, they're referring to the early 2000s, because admittedly anime did look not so good back then when they were just getting the hang of using the computers to do this. But Princess Tutu looks just beautiful, and all the characters look very cute and everything. They did a great job of designing the characters, they did a great job of creating the world, and they also use color beautifully here as well. Now, the one thing that I want to compliment them on is because they came out in the early 2000s, they didn't use CG, and thank you for not using CG, because this is one of the reasons why it aged so much better than many other anime from that time period. So as far as the audio is concerned, they have beautiful music here, this classical, theatrical feeling to it, where it matches perfectly with the fact that you have characters doing ballet here. On top of that, there's an English dub, which was done beautifully, and I highly recommend to check this out with its English dub. So overall, Princess Tutu is just this experience that I came in not really thinking I would like it, and I came away actually enjoying it and realizing that it's a pretty good story. I would recommend this for anyone who watches this review and thinks that you might enjoy some of the things that I've talked about and shown you, but I will also admit that this is definitely not for everyone. This is not everybody's cup of tea, and that's fine. Not everybody's going to like this, but I do know that there are some people out there that will enjoy this show, but for you, I recommend it. So anyways, I wanted to thank you all for watching. If you've seen Princess Tutu, in the comments section below, let me know all about your thoughts on that, and of course, if you enjoyed the review, be sure to subscribe. If you'd like to support the channel and future videos, check out the Patreon channel linked in the description section below, where you can get all sorts of special bonuses, such as early reviews, such as this one, which was uploaded at least a week in advance, and we also have other things such as group Discord chats as well. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.